Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cultural Heritage Game Jam AMA with our guest today, Special Agent Jake Archer. Special Agent Archer, how are you doing on this fantastic Friday?
I'm doing fine, Alchemist. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you for joining us. When we started the show, chat, I had a moment when I got to meet Special Agent Archer, and I saw him show up, and I was like, "Oh God, I feel like I should have put on a better shirt and everything." But he assured me that I am perfectly fine the way I am, which I'm taking a little bit of solace in. So I don't want to kind of keep people waiting because I have a bunch of questions that I have, and I kind of want to ask those questions to you because some of these things are the idea of working on a team like this is something that I feel is tremendously interesting. So before I tell you why I find it interesting, what inspired you to kind of get into this line of work?
I can bring this back to my youth. I saw my grandfather, who was a local artist, work pen and ink drawings, and he also created the amazing shell dishes from shells collected at the Jersey Shore and the Outer Banks down in North Carolina, and he would make these amazing creations from just shells, sand, and glue. And I thought about how do you care for these? How do you? They were so fragile, and from that, I never saw anything else like it in my life, and still haven't to this day. And that captured my spirit, and I started buying and selling when others were buying and selling baseball cards in their teenage years. I was doing that too, but I also would go to juried craft fairs, and I bought my first works of art from local artists, and it just truly inspired me to see some of the great creation people can make with their brilliant creativity. From that, I can draw stick figures. So my love of law and law enforcement naturally inspired me to say, hey, where can I make a contribution to heritage preservation? And there's a lot more to it, but fundamentally, that's kind of the genesis of it for me.
So I was going to ask what motivates you, but you kind of already answered that. So instead, I'm going to pivot to what is your favorite work of art that you have personally?
Wow, that's a tough one. I collect some living artists, especially in the New Jersey, Pennsylvania region, who are brilliant. And lights just went out on me. I don't know what they're trying to say to me here. So, but as long as
Time
we're
to go home.
fix that. Yeah, right. It's a Friday. So I think some of the Bucks County Impressionist work that I have, a wonderful county in Pennsylvania, as well. Some of the pastels I have from some of the great artists in New Jersey. I'm thinking of a lot, and I don't want to name them all here because if I start naming them and I don't name everyone, then I'm sure I'll hear about it. But the idea is I take a lot of privilege and honor owning works by living artists. And trust me, I'm a government worker. I can't afford the most expensive artwork, but I get to help businesses. Every artist is a small business. Every gallery is usually a business, and you are able to patronize the arts and make a difference. And on top of that, you're able to have live among these beautiful works of art on your walls, and you get to interact with them on a daily basis. And there's just this synergy to it that brings your house alive, brings your home alive, and just makes you really appreciate the great work of these living artists.
Yeah, I definitely understand that. There's an artist that I am a huge fan of, and I got to see him at a convention. His name is Judd Henry, and he makes this painting that's behind me. So they're kind of ukiyo-ed paintings, but they're made of like pop culture figures. So it was one of those really cool things to kind of combine those two things together. And so I have several of these that I kind of cycle from time to time on my stream. Now, there's another question that came from chat, and I am going to forewarn you guys, chat, because Special Agent Archer is an FBI agent working active cases, there are some cases we may not be able to talk about, so he may not be able to describe what he feels his most critical case is. But I do feel I can ask, and if this question I think should be fine. What is one of the biggest success stories from your career that you can share with us on the stream?
Sure. I can tell you, most recently, it was published in a magazine about my work on the Don Miller investigation in Indiana. And that was one of the most important cases that I worked in, and the case agent out there and colleague and friend of mine, Tim Carpenter, I'm sure, has ever worked. And so that involved us being able to, as an art crime team, not just Tim and I, but so many other agents and FBI professional staff and experts came together to be able to collect a whole lot of material that was looted. A lot of American material, and of course, a lot of cultural property that we believe was illicitly obtained from all over the world. And to be among, to walk among and to handle these precious artifacts, it's truly a breathtaking moment. And it was, again, a privilege to be able to work that case. So that's one of the first ones that come to mind. There's many that have had the ability to work, but first one off the top of my head.
I completely understand. So this question kind of comes from chat, and it piggybacks off of what I just asked. What's the most enjoyable part of your job? Like, I assume that like being able to take these artifacts and return them the way they should be is a kind of a reward in and of itself. But for you personally, what is the most enjoyable part of this job?
Well, you hit the nail on the head there. That is repatriations, as we call it, when we're able to repatriate the artifacts to the rightful owners. That is about as good as it gets for law enforcement. You're making a victim whole, and that is a core FBI mission. So that right there is important, and I can tell you with some of the very powerful moments with some of the Native American cases that I've been fortunate enough to be part of, some cleansing ceremonies. That is, I'm from New Jersey. I'm Catholic. I don't. I'm introduced to these wonderful tribes and Native American to be a part of that. Some of those really intense moments I'll never forget, and I cherish those. And I'm so thankful that I was allowed in and accepted and allowed to be a part of those.
Yeah, I imagine that's got to be a surreal moment when you like reunite some artifact with the people that it was taken from, and then they kind of invite you into their culture to give you that kind of glimpse into it. I feel a lot of times we end up in this situation where we sometimes can't see the forest for the trees, and we can't really get a look into those types of things. So I feel like this type of job lets you get sneak peeks into those types of cultures. But on the complete flip side of that, I want to talk about technology, because I know that although some of these artifacts are very old pieces of work, you guys have some kind of newish technologies that help you kind of discover those or make your job easier or sometimes more difficult. So what are some advances in technology that have made your job either easier or more difficult?
Alchemist, that's a great question. So obviously, in general, the ability to gather more information is always paramount. But some of the technology, maybe it's where we want to go. So specific to cultural heritage, what we're trying to do is and we can look to the Polish government for this. They have an application that's called Art Sherlock. The Ministry of Culture over there has a division of looted art for the Polish wartime losses from World War II. They are still looking for about 500,000 objects, and they created an application that you're able to, it has algorithms where you can take a snapshot of images in the field and compare them against quality images of known looted works, and it's instantaneous. So that is something that we're really excited about as a whole in the cultural heritage preservation field and as it relates to law enforcement. So, but one of the issues in general, we think about the flow of illicit property, and so it's a lot of this is technology that's already being used to enforce other types of transnational organized crime, drugs, trafficking of humans, weapons, things of that nature. Where can we utilize existing technology and pivot it towards the application of stemming the flow of illicit cultural property. So a lot of that comes down to algorithms being able to, in real time, potentially identify material.
Mm. So, kind of going a step kind of deeper with that. What are some of the biggest challenges that you and your team face today related to combating antiquities trafficking, disrupting trafficking networks, and protecting against the looting and destruction of cultural properties around the world? I know that for the most part, I've always assumed that the FBI works on a lot of things that are domestic, but the nature of this type of job means that you probably have to liaise with a lot of other organizations around the world. Are there any particular challenges that come along with that?
There's many challenges, and so Alchemist, again, great question. The mission of the FBI and specifically the art crime team is to enforce violations of federal law as it relates to art and cultural property. And so when we start that concept, that's how we can expand out around the world, provided we always have a federal nexus, something that ties to the United States. There's elsewhere in the world where there's just not a United States nexus, even though there might be a state's interest. And so we always have to keep that core mission for us of enforcing federal law, the law that we're supposed to. And from that, cases, I can assure you, cases will take you all over the world because of the power of the U.S. market as being a market nation for a lot of this material. So when you think of it, it's a little bit more in the weeds in terms of we can operate with our foreign partners by and through the State Department or FBI legal attachés anywhere in the world, provided there's justification and nexus as it relates to enforcing U.S. federal law.
Gotcha. Okay. So that kind of clears up one of the misconceptions that I had in terms of that, because I, again, always had the belief that the FBI worked primarily domestically. But what are some other things you think people would be surprised to learn about the work you do and the things you encounter in this work? Because I imagine that there are some things that, just like my misconception about how the FBI operates, that are common. So what's a thing that you think people would be surprised to learn about your work?
Specific to my work is understanding the breadth and scope. What is difficult for people to understand, even though it's simple to say, and I'll say it here, our work involves objects that span recorded human history, can be found anywhere in the world, and can be moved, secreted, trafficked by anyone in the world. So stop and think about that. It's temporal, spatial, it's great time and space distances here to which you have to very quickly try and understand the particular object you're dealing with, the history of that particular object, its cultural significance, as well as the violation for which this object is linked to, and then everything about the potential criminality involved with those that are engaged in that activity. So it is massive in terms of the data dump and just trying to understand that. And we don't know, the most important thing is to understand we don't know it all. We're not even close to knowing it all. We have to make ourselves, we have to learn about things as they come in for each and every subject matter. For a lot of the cases that we deal with on a regular basis, we have a great understanding and great depth and skill with, but we continually are, we continually have to deal with matters from all that run the gamut, and it's very difficult from that respect.
Yeah, I imagine that's something that would make kind of just each case difficult to kind of parse and figure out which ones to kind of go after. Kind of piggybacking off that, we have a question from chat, which is, how do you decide which cases to pursue or how to assign priority to a case? And again, I know that you yourself specifically do not choose that. I know that is an agency-wide thing, but is there any specific kind of guidance or ways that you kind of go like, okay, we're going to go after this particular case, or do you tie them to things that are kind of already being worked on?
Another great question. So there is triage that has to occur in this, and it it's a rubric based on experience, where we're looking at what is potentially solvable, what is the importance of the matter, where what are the proofs that can enable us to move forward in an appropriate way. These are really difficult questions sometimes, where the balance of the case hangs on a knife edge. Are we putting resources to this or not? Sometimes it's very simple answer, and the answer is yes. Sometimes a very simple answer, and it's no. But again, as these cases come in, and especially with some more of the complex ones, there's only about 20 IR crime agents. Now, anybody in the FBI can work on our crime matter, but as it relates to our specialty program, there's only about 20 of us. And so our resources are limited. Like everyone else, we have a budget, and so we have to prioritize. So again, it's just having that honest conversation among a group of professionals who understand law enforcement, the law, and also this particular subject matter, to be able to say, if there's 10 cases out here, we feel confident we can proceed on these 3 or these 4. We can't be everything to everybody. And there might be some cases where the public says, why did you do this and not that? And it's because we had a better chance potentially to get the result, to get justice in there. Whereas this one, even though maybe we recognize it's important, it's not ripe. There's not enough there. It's inconceivable for us to succeed in that matter. And so I can't give you any specifics. I'm just trying to give you the understanding that we have when we all get together and try and discuss some of the weighty issues.
I knew that there were some things you wouldn't be able to discuss, but that question kind of puts another image in my head. So me personally, one of my favorite movies is The Thomas Crown Affair. For those of you in chat who do not know The Thomas Crown Affair, or you're too young to have watched The Thomas Crown Affair, it is a movie in which Pierce Brosnan plays basically a billionaire philanthropist who is so bored with life that he decides to steal a painting off of a wall in a museum in New York. And you kind of get to see this cat and mouse between Thomas Crown and a character played by Rene Russo, in addition to Dennis Leary, who works with I believe he works with the FBI. So thinking about that and having that in my mind, are there any particular examples of games, movies, etc., things from pop culture that represent your work or serve as a good reference for people to draw inspiration from?
So I want to be careful on how I answer that, because I grew up, I think for so many of us, we loved Indiana Jones growing up, but we realized that is not appropriate in the modern sense. So, you're a kid and you enjoy the Hollywood-esque side of that, but then you realize that this isn't the way that things should be, and it harkens to a different era. So that's always the one that comes up to me. But now, I actually, it's funny. Maybe this is the gamer nerd in me. I think of Zelda. All right, I go to Zelda. It's a quest. You're on a quest, and it is not linear, and you are moving all over the place, and you're trying. Your ultimate, in this case, our ultimate goal is justice. Our ultimate goal is always justice here, but you have so many of these little adventures along the way that help shape your ability to handle new adventures as they come in. And as the game gets more complex, you're able to hopefully succeed and get through each level, even though you're not quite sure what's coming next. And so that's just me. I was a Mike Tyson's Punch-Out and a Zelda fan growing up. Played those games.
Yeah. Excellent taste. Excellent taste.
Thank
Legend
you.
of Zelda is probably one of my favorite games. This isn't a question from chat or anything. This is a question that I kind of have. And this is a very corny question, so please forgive me. But you mentioned Indiana Jones. Have you ever had a moment where you were working a case and you actually, were able to recover that artifact and you thought to yourself or said out loud, like, this belongs in a museum? Or is that one of those things that just popped, like just rolls through your head and you're like, I'm not going to say that out loud?
We've said that out loud, and it's actually as great of a feeling as it is to recover it. It's sad. It's equally sad and tragic, because and whether it belongs into a museum, I should qualify that and go, or whether it belongs back with the stakeholders, the people for whom it was taken from. The idea is it done where we found it. And you're right. I've had that out loud moment. I've had it in my head because it's happened, unfortunately, all too often.
Completely understand. So another question from chat that I think is actually a fairly good and also kind of general question. What are the most common types of art crimes you guys end up kind of solving through your work?
So let me pivot that slightly and just say, let's think of it this way. What are the general buckets of crimes that we see? Broadly speaking, maybe it's better to answer it that way. I can break it down in about three main categories.
Okay.
First, we have birth. Second, we have fraud, forgery. And then third, we'll have illicit trafficking. So, and others, certainly. But if we think about some of the common themes, those are three big ones. So stealing things, forging or defrauding people, if we put that into one group, and then smuggling things, looting and smuggling things. So those are really some of the big categories there.
Gotcha. So, okay. So kind of pivoting back to the Culture Heritage Game Jam, which is kind of what we're here about and what we're speaking to you about. What are some things that you hope game developers and players take away from participating in this game jam and playing the games that are created from this game jam?
That's again the question of the day here, because I'm excited for this, and fundamentally it's pragmatism. Okay. This is a new area for us to liaison with. I'm really excited about it. I know Catherine Foster from State Department, who's worked on this, has done tremendous work. This is an avenue for us, a new group to liaison with, to say, hey, here's an issue. What skills and mindset do you bring to the table that might be able to break through on a matter? And really, what I think, if I can say it in two parts, I think what I'm hoping for is object identification. Our cases hinge on quickly ascertaining what object is, and then being able to get the right resources to quickly diagnose that case so that we can move on it or in an appropriate manner. And then following on from that, the idea is, okay, if we're able to go ahead and have some sort of pragmatic response from this gaming community to say, hey, we understand we're building games here. These are fun. But we know that, what I'm looking for is just someone to break through and to say, this has a practical application here at the border when things are coming in, or here in the field when maybe a search warrant's being executed and you come across something that you're not quite sure what it is. So again, if that were to come out of this in any way, shape, or form, I don't do cartwheels, but we'll get back on. I'll try, because that would be phenomenal.
I completely understand that. It's always interesting seeing, especially more and more nowadays, the intersection of gaming and other kind of fields and such, because for the longest time, gaming was very limited in, this is just play. This is just a place for you to kind of de-stress and decompress after work. But we're finding more and more now that there are so many different ways in which you can develop a game that does something other than just satisfy that urge for adventure or, to pass idle time. So I'm personally kind of, oh, good.
Oh yeah, just to add to that, so obviously I care a lot about how can we more efficiently do our job for the federal government, which object identification is clearly an area we want to expand to. But any games that bring up awareness about cultural heritage matters and are able to do so in a thoughtful way, that's beneficial to us all. So, and I'm not quite sure what that would look like in a video game format, but I can't wait to see what some of the results might be. And so again, just being able to get the good word out there in a thoughtful, appropriate manner is really exciting to me in this paradigm.
So one of the things you mentioned, and I kind of want to loop back around to it. You mentioned Indiana Jones, and you said that that's not really kind of the way that it should go. That kind of leads me to this next question. A lot of times in pop culture, the movies and media tend to kind of glorify the viewpoint of like where more advanced societies take antiquities from less developed countries and put them on display as a way of we're protecting those artifacts. How can we switch that narrative around, and why is it important to protect and preserve art and antiquities for the cultures that they are sacred to and representative of within those communities?
Alchemist, that's a very deep question. That is very deep, and there's to unpack that would require a dissertation. In all seriousness, because I am privy to these conversations, and I want to make it clear that this is one of those questions where it is important, but I can't have that in my capacity with the FBI because I have to stick to my focus of just enforcing federal law. However, I recognize that these conversations are going on, and again, the idea is this is conversations for academia, the stakeholders, governments. We need people getting together and showing all sides to the issue and just working together to resolve it, because the world is evolving. So there is recognition that we are moving in a new direction. It's just something that I can't personally opine on in this forum, but nonetheless, I thank you for asking such a deep question.
No worries. I gotta sprinkle some in there to keep you on your toes. Okay, this is completely unrelated to everything else we talked about, but I asked you this question before the stream starts, and I know that someone in chat is watching this stream and they had this question. How often do you catch flack for being named Special Agent Archer? Like, is that something like every day in the office someone makes a new joke, or is it one of those things where you're like, haha, it's not like I've never heard that one 50 times?
I can tell you it happens all too often. I love the show. It's great. But I also, when I have to call people sometimes on the telephone, especially during the pandemic where you might not be able to meet with people, sometimes they think it's a joke and they hang up on me, and because they think I'm using the name from the television show. And also, my first name's Jake. So, you wear khakis one time and then all the State Farm jokes come in. So I get it both ways with my first name and my last name.
I was gonna let that one go, Special Agent Archer. I was gonna be nice, and I wasn't gonna bring up the Jake, the Agent Jake from State Farm. I was gonna be nice, but since you brought it up, I'm sorry, I can't keep that one together. Okay, so getting back on this, I know that when it comes to the FBI, like you said, this is a new kind of arena in working with game developers and game designers. What kind of went into the thought of even like approaching an event like this and kind of leveraging the global game development teams to kind of work on a project like this?
Well, I have to give credit where credit's due, and that's with Catherine Foster and State Department's Bureau of Education and Cultural Affairs, who brought this idea to the fore. But I will tell you, the manner in which it was brought is something that hopefully, at least I'm very excited about. This was brought up during a United States Cultural Heritage Coordinating Committee working group meeting of the Technology Working Group. So this was discussed as, how do we have greater outreach on behalf of the U.S. government? And so the United States in 2016 had a law that was passed. It was the Protect and Preserve International Cultural Property Act. And in that act, it was a sense of Congress that the United States federal agencies engaged in some form of cultural heritage protection should coordinate their activities to have a better response to stemming the flow of illicit cultural property to and from the United States. And that coordinating committee has 4 arms really that get the work done. And one is technology, and that's the Cultural Antiquities Task Force. It's been around since 2004, and it was merged in. And we have another one that's preservation, and another one that's public awareness and private partnerships. So these 4 working groups are where government folks get together, and we talk about big issues that are common to all of us in the U.S. government. And in the technology working group session, this idea was brought up. And so this was something that at our highest level for the US government, when we're trying to say, where can we think about incorporating new people into this conversation, this idea was hatched. And so it's just, again, it's great to see, it's great to be here with you. And I'm really excited to see if what comes of this.
Again, this is one of those things that when I was reading kind of to do my research for this interview, I ended up falling down a rabbit hole on both sides of this subject. Like on the game jam side, knowing how game jams are scheduled and how they're basically cramming the entire development cycle of a game into a short amount of time was something that I ended up kind of falling down a rabbit hole in, like how the logistics of that works. But on the same side, I kind of fell down a rabbit hole in looking into the FBI art crime team and things like that, because it's one of those things that if I didn't know that this was a thing, if I wasn't sitting here talking to you, I would think that this was something that would make an excellent like story or novel kind of backdrop. Have there ever been any pieces of media where they have alluded to like you guys as a team that you've been able to kind of like talk to people about? Or is it one of those things that you read and you were like, we don't do anything like that at all. That's not how this works at all.
I think there's a lot of that. And I think it's not just, it's not just to the art crime team. I think it's, Hollywood has a vision of things and they tell a narrative and a story and it's entertaining. But the day-to-day life of a lot of us in the U.S. government is nothing like that. So we take it for what it's worth. And however, I will say that when we are hot on the trail, we are on a case, or we are deep into an operation on something, it is thrilling just because you realize what's at stake, and you try and do your absolute best to get to the truth, to find the truth and to get justice. So the answer is, I think if I understand your question right, there's probably a lot of misconception about what we do. Sometimes it's accurately portrayed, other times it's not, and maybe why it's not is because it's just for entertainment, and we should just all take it as that.
Completely understand that. There are some times where I know there are times where I've watched movies portray like streamers or content creators, and you kind of go, that's not what our life is like at all. Like maybe some. But the difference is for a content creator, there's not a lot that goes into starting. There are some things you kind of have to start off with. You create an account, you create you get your camera and your microphone and you start streaming. But I imagine going to be a special agent working on the FBI art crime task force is a little bit more involved. If someone were watching this stream and they wanted to get into this line of work, what would you suggest be the first kind of steps that they would take in embarking on that?
So I can just tell you, specific to the FBI and the art crime team, I'll just tell you generally how it goes. So in order to be on the art crime team, you need to be a special agent, which you can't apply to the FBI to be an art crime agent. You apply to the FBI to be a special agent, and you have to go through, and you go to FBIjobs.gov, and I encourage everyone to do so, to check that out. We're always looking for good people. So I encourage you to look that over, as well as our core values and mission. And when you see that, you say, okay, I want to give myself to the U.S. government, and I'm going to go ahead. I feel that I have the requisite qualifications to apply. And if you're the background and fitness, and you get through everything, and you get the quote, you'll have what's called orders night, where they send you, they let you know where you're being sent around the country. And next thing you know, you show up in that city, and you're not going to be working art crime. I can assure you that, because it takes at least 5 years of service before you can apply to be on the art crime team. So what does that mean? It means that you have a chance to work many other violations that are all important. Art crime is, again, it is great content. It is great storytelling. for gamers in Hollywood. We recognize that. But there is so many other important things that the FBI does, violent crime and gangs, to our complex organized crime, to our white collar crime, to our counterintelligence branch and our counterterrorism branch. So our cyber units. You have crimes against children. You have all these fantastic units that you'll get a chance to work in. And so from that, you will figure out, like everyone else, I really enjoy this line of work, and maybe art crime isn't what I thought it was. But if it turns out that you still want to do art crime, then at that point, again, we're not everywhere in the country. We only have about 20 of us. So it just comes down, like anything else, to, is there a slot that's open in your area? Are you competitive? And when we say competitive, we don't require you to have an art history master's in your background. We require you to be a proficient investigator. We can teach you the rest. We just need to know that this is something that you want to commit yourself to, and that you have the requisite skill sets that you've built over time, over those at least 5 years, that you can produce quality results as an investigator. And then at that point, we'll take care of your training and show you the ropes.
I'm seeing a lot of parallels between that and just enlisting in the military, which that I enlisted when I was younger. So when you were saying, like, you get your orders and you go around the country, like, I know that feeling of, like, you finish basic, you finish your technical training, and you go, okay, where am I going? And some people, you can tell, they're like, yeah, I got Hickam Air Base in Hawaii. And then there's like, I got Pope. It's in the middle of the country. I have no idea what I'm doing. So I imagine that there's, on orders nights, there's some people that are super excited about where they're getting their orders to. So one of the questions that came from chat that I think is an excellent kind of segue off of that is, you mentioned a proficient investigator. What, in your opinion, kind of signifies a proficient investigator?
Boy, these are great questions. So let me just stop and say thank you. These have all been wonderful questions. A proficient investigator, I would say, is almost like a proficient gamer. Can you start with the concepts? There is a crime that's occurred, and I'm going to speak about the criminal branch, because counterterrorism and counterintelligence are different branches. But fundamentally, there's a problem that involves the United States that you are empowered to investigate, and you are empowered to collect evidence, and somehow try and get a result that which we call justice. And so, can you start with nothing, with just, on day one, wow, this is what someone said? Are you able to gather evidence in a systematic manner and understand what happened, and work with prosecutors to build things that can be taken all the way through to trial and subsequent appeal? And really, that's the proficiency we're looking for. We're looking for case agents. So we go back to Hollywood, or some of the misconceptions. Yes, do we have some amazing that are on our hostage rescue team, our FONS team, which I'm part of, and they do some really exciting stuff? Yes, but at the core of what you are expected to be as a special agent is a case agent. And that means you're out there working cases, solving crimes, and that means usually from beginning to end. That's proficiency for us. So as a gamer, I'm not quite sure how, but can you of a game, develop a game, and bring that game to market? Mm-hmm. That's proficiency in our.
Yeah, that would line up pretty well with from a game developer standpoint. Can you prototype a game? Can you put together the disparate concepts into something that is working, that is playable, and that is enjoyable, and then deal with any subsequent bugs that come of it? Because I assume that just like with a game that you're developing, there are some bugs that come from it. I imagine there are also sometimes bugs that come up in an investigation, in a dispute, which kind of segues to a question I got from chat that I'm really curious about. Are there ever times where there is dispute over a recovered item and where it should be returned? And if so, how are those? Can you tell us how those are resolved?
So the answer is yes, but this question would probably require a lot of discrete subparts, meaning we'd have to take it on a case by case basis. So in terms of say we were to hit a horde of artifacts, and there's a whole different mix of artifacts. Uh, Sometimes you might have experts or stakeholders saying, or victims saying, this is mine and it's from this part of the world, but in reality, maybe it's from another part and it's just misidentified. Again, I go back to what I said earlier. We handle objects and we handle histories and matters that span recorded human history. And so it is difficult sometimes to process all of that. And so as a result, we need experts. We need outside help because we are not, I speak one language. I try and I speak, imagine trying to have to speak all the languages of the world. You can't do it. It's impossible. So you bring in people who can. And so the very similar concept here with a lot of these items, so that when they come back, and again, if there's disputed items, meaning that, and I'm not getting into the debate of, hey, this museum has this particular item and somebody wants it back. I'm talking about, if I understand the question, if we have a bunch of items, they're all together, which one goes where? It's through a diligent process using experts that's imperfect at times, but yet still probably the best thing that we have.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like there's no such thing as a perfect system for anything. So the most you can kind of do is try to work to the best of your knowledge, the best of your ability with what you have. And at the end of the day, sometimes that's enough. I mean, it should always be enough, but sometimes you leave work feeling a little bit more good about yourself than others. So you've mentioned the State Department a couple of times in us talking today. Are there any other government agencies that you can say that you work with, or as well as like private or nonprofit organizations?
Certainly, I immediately think of Department of Homeland Security and Homeland Security Investigations. Their Cultural Properties, Art, and Antiquities unit in Washington, D.C. is fantastic, as well as CBP, Customs Border Protection, fall under the DHS umbrella there. We work with them closely. We work with all of our federal agencies that are a part of the Cultural Coordinating Committee. So that involves Department of Defense, IRS, National Endowment of Humanities, Library of Congress. I mean, we deal with federal agencies, Department of Interior, which part of that is obviously the National Park Service, but you will have Bureau of Land Management, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, U.S. Forest Service. There's so many different agencies that we'll liaison with, and it's truly one of the great joys of this job is being able to meet all these great government who are all committed to just trying to do the best that we can in this area. We also have a lot of partnerships with our great academic institutions around, and the big one, of course, Smithsonian. The Smithsonian is such a key partner for us, for the United States government as a whole. And then, of course, we have some other intergovernmental agencies and intergovernmental agencies and NGOs that we'll work with from time to time. So really, it's on a case-by-case basis, but the door's always open. And again, one is why I'm here.
Completely understand. And it's always cool to kind of imagine all of those pieces working together, especially for any of us who've played games with like cooperative components. We know that sometimes just getting everyone sitting down at the table at the same time can be difficult. So I imagine that when it comes to coordinating several different organizations, both private, nonprofit, government, as well as working with governments around the world, is always something that's super challenging to do. I'm going to pivot off of the more serious kind of work-related questions to kind of something that's a little bit more technology kind of focused. What are your thoughts on the growing interest in NFTs being used to like sign a piece of artwork or as used in a currency? And my kind of question off of that, because that question came from chat, my follow-up from that is there anything that NFTs and the ability to digitally sign artwork has done to kind of help you guys be able to track artwork a little bit better?
Okay, so there's a multi-part question here, and with an emerging technology, which is fascinating to me in terms of for reasons, but fundamentally, me comes out and say an NFT is merely an thing of legal rights. All right, it's saying that I'm willing to give you this portion of something, and you're entitled to it, and then you can do certain things with that legally. And so that's how I'm always thinking about these things, because we have to understand, if we go back to our buckets of things, we have theft, fraud, forgery, and then illicit trafficking. These are just widgets that fall, presumably into these criminal activities in the future. And I'm not saying that this is the case. What I'm saying is, when you're asking how we put these things, we try and break it down to its component parts and try and understand where criminal activity could occur in this field. So with that being said, I think the NFT market is clearly, I see it with my own eyes, and I think everyone sees there's a lot of discussion about it in the media. There's a lot of recent sales. It seems to be a hot topic. See how this progresses, because like everything, new trends mature, probably change over time. I'm eager to see where it goes. Underlying that is, I assume, is the second part of your question, is the blockchain technology, which for digital signatures, and that presents a different line of questioning and thought process. Because the two work together, the uncoupling of rights, and as well the technicalization of signatures and accountability. If that's even a phrase, but we're making it one for this. So, the idea of just the confluence of these factors in this new arena. I am just merely a bystander in this, waiting, seeing if on the periphery, if there are violations of U.S. law and criminal activity. It's going to be treated just like any other matter that the FBI would handle. There's nothing special to it. It's special to us as people because it's new. But the fundamentals to enforcing the laws are still going to be, the same.
Okay. So going from kind of modern technology, we had a question in chat that I'm actually really curious about. You mentioned that you guys' work kind of spans the breadth of recorded history. Have you noticed there's kind of a historical cutoff in your work? Has there been we don't get anything older than a certain period in time, or is it mostly focused around modern-ish works?
It runs the gamut of human history. It spanned human history, and it's beautiful and equally daunting. So it's beautiful to encounter all of these different items and all of these different disparate histories as they relate to those items and your cases, and then seeing how some weave together. But ultimately, no, it is clear. We will have cases that involve objects from 1,000 years ago, and we'll have cases that involve maybe frauds or forgeries from a year ago. So it's really, the answer is no. It spans recorded human.
So this is a question I'm curious about now, just based on that. What is the oldest object that you yourself have gotten to? And I don't want to say handle, because I know in some cases some of these objects are so old that you don't want to actually physically handle them. But what is the oldest object that you were in, I'll say, handling distance of during your career, if you can talk about it?
So let me say it this way, because I don't want to jeopardize anything. There are vessels, intact vessels from I would say from the Middle East that are stunning and thousands upon thousands of years old. I mean, and alchemists, sometimes we do have to handle these. One thing that I really care about, I'm on our evidence response team, and so I process bombings, shootings, kidnappings, homicides as it relates to federal matters. We have to interact with that evidence where it is a crime scene, and thus sometimes we handle these objects. And when I'm holding this vessel and moving it from the to a safe location, it's a perilous journey, and it is a lot of effort and a lot of nerves. I'm very always nervous. But when you are in that moment, when you're handling that piece, that's another time when we talk about what are some of the great joys in this career. When you're actually handling it and you're getting it out of there and you're getting it back to safety, it's just you and that object, and it's in your hands, and it's made it for 4, 5, 6,000 years intact. You better not drop it. You better make sure it gets to safety. And again, that's the skill set, that niche discipline that the FBI Art Crime Team brings to the table for these matters.
You listen, I'm Special Agent Archer. You said that, and you were talking about holding this object, and I'm going to be very honest with you. My hands immediately went clammy because I'm just like, I could just imagine me holding some, ancient, like some vessel of something from, Egypt. And it's just, I imagine your hands go either instantly dry or they're instantly soaked. And you're just like, I'm just going to real carefully set this down. But the idea of that kind of has me segue into another direction, which is actually a question that came from chat that I'm really curious about. You mentioned that you've played some games, and I imagine as a special agent, you don't have a lot of free time. So you may not get as much time to play games as you may like. But with what you know and what you can kind of divulge and discuss, what would a co-op cultural heritage game kind of look like in your mind? Like, forgetting about the idea of like knowing how game dev works, just how would the gameplay loop look to you?
That's a great question, because you're right. I don't have a lot of time to play. Although I must say I was able to play recently a blast from the past, Bill Lambier's Combat Battle from 1991 for Super Nintendo. But
I'm from Detroit, so I'm a Lambier fan.
There you go. It was a ridiculous game, but I loved it. I am addicted, or I haven't played it too much recently, but when I do play it, it's Sid Meier's Civilization, and I don't know what this gaming community thinks of that. I make no judgment on it, other than yes, the question. I like this particular game. I know if that's the idea specifically in the way that game moves from stage to stage. But the idea is anything that requires you to contemplate the matter. I don't know if it's like duck hunt. It's not that simple.
Right.
I think this subject matter although I will say, anyone that comes through with something snappy and quick and fun, I welcome it. Anything to get the message out, really. So don't limit yourself. And if you think you can do something that's quick and snappy and fun, go for it. But if you're asking me personally, what I would be interested in playing, it would probably be something along from a first person to a Sid Meier's Civilization type thing. More maybe turn-based movement, thinking things through, a lot of different choices and paths to take, which obviously might be a little bit more difficult to build.
Okay, I'm sitting here thinking about it because that question came from chat, and I'm kind of trying to imagine what that would look like. And I imagine that a game like that, if you were going to do something like that, what I think would be an interesting kind of way of going about it is taking kind of the idea of Sid Meier's Civilization, but taking, instead of it being like you're building up these civilizations, as you're finding these artifacts and you're unearthing them, you get to take cues from the artifact to figure out which civilization it kind of lines up with, and then taking over and taking control of a team in that location to kind of like get it back to where it needs to go, or to investigate the scene of where it was taken from. Maybe along the lines of like old school, like Carmen Sandiego games, where you'd kind of like try to figure out where in the world Carmen was. So that feels like that would be kind of that feels like that would be an interesting concept. So I know that we're getting close to time. So first of all, I want to thank you very much for taking the time to sit down and talk with me about this today. I'm tremendously interested in not only getting to learn more about just like the cultural heritage, just the way those committees work, in addition to learning more about the FBI art crime team. So thank you very much for coming and sharing that information with us.
It's a pleasure, Alchemist, and thank you again to the audience and everyone tuned in and for all of your great questions. Good luck.
I'm looking
Can't
forward.
wait to see the result.
Good luck to you as well. I'm looking forward to like reading an article and going, I got to talk to Special Agent Archer. He's a really funny guy. The guy's great. So I'm looking forward to when those things can come out, kind of being able to know, like, I talked to that guy. He's a good guy.
Well, thank you for your service, and I'm looking forward to playing these games.
I'm looking forward to seeing them too. So until next time, chat, we are going to take care. We're gonna cut it off from here. But thank you for your questions from chat as well. And until next time, take care of each other and take care of yourselves. All right, later.